So as you enter our yard, this is the view that you get. I like this tree because it kind of frames and makes an archway right over the stone pathway. The pathway wasn't here. My wife and I dug all this foundation for these, brought all the stone in, laid all of it. You can see how it's well established with the moss growing between it. The tin beneath there are used to store potting soil, and the potting bench is perfectly suited for working up here. I do like to put in a lot of small details. The stone you see there, again, is another auction find. Its architectural stone came from a salvage building. My wife has the idea with the plants, and I like the faces, or I both like the faces. Little herb garden here. Lemongrass, basil, oregano, parsley. I actually have a little pitcher plant here. We bought it last year, did very, very well, did not winter over all that well, and is trying to recover from winter right now. The hostas are very well established, somewhat too well established, I would say. It's sort of similar, it's the same variety as this giant specimen right here. This specimen, this is cut down to the ground. That grows in probably a month and a half. I have to prune it practically every other day now because it grows so aggressively. This year I've trained it to come out onto the cable, and we'll see how that looks. So just a little tour from the top of our deck overlooking our yard. Our property line stretches down below that tan shed down there. So as you can see, we're actually quite close to our neighbors, but with all the trees, you never know you have them. So my wife and I dug this pond. We wanted to use the space here, but it was really unusable. And we found, hey, what better way to add a little bit of peace and quiet to the backyard was the pond. It has provided so much enjoyment, actually. The fish are wonderful. Found this fountain at a local auction, repaired it, and it's given us about 5 years of burbling sound. Storing the fish food was an issue, so we decided to buy this firebox. I actually think that it's from Canada because it's in both French and English. Patent is on it, 1924. And just enough space to hide to store some pruning shears and food for the fish. So this area of the yard was very problematic with regard to shade, stopping all the grass from growing. So about 2 years ago, decided to lay this gravel little walkway. Transplanted a lot of hostas and other ferns from other sections of the yard. Brought them down here. Overlooking the lower yard. Our yard is terraced, have more space in the yard. 2 sheds. The shed on the left actually was at one time sunk into the ground. All the brown trim you see on it was not there. I put all that in at a later date, trying to make it look like an old railroad station. This shed here was actually a children's playhouse. The door was about 1.5 feet shorter. The windows were about 1 foot lower. It too had sunk down into the mud, jacked it up, made the trim to look like it was an old train station, and great storage area for pool supplies. The pool. The arbor here is one of 2 I built, really to add a little privacy between our house and the neighbors. You see a lot of grapes on those. Grapes are there for nothing but to feed the Japanese beetles and the birds. I'm a fan of local auctions. This stone right here came from a local building here. It's actually hand cut stone. Can't see it due to the vegetation now, but this is one of the other pathways you'd have to take to get to the upper level of the yard. And here's another one of those arbors that I built. Covered in honeysuckle, attracts hummingbirds all day long. Here's another view of the yard. And the pool. And there's the pump house we talked about earlier, with all the mechanicals fairly hidden from view. You can really see the terrace here. This stone staircase, it's not the code by any stretch of the imagination, but it really does add a lot of style to the yard. These stones came from salvaged barns that were here in this area. Limestone was a predominant building material, and these are very special stones in that they are large and they are flat, and they were used to construct the outside corners of the buildings. Coming up the steps through the upper area of the yard. Lots of hostas, elephant ear plants just growing now. My wife does all the planting of the flowers. Here's another view of that chimney topper we spoke of. A view of the dry stack stone wall that I built several years ago. Really adds to the character of our outdoor room. I am a fan of railroad history. Found this railroad crossing sign from the 1920s or 30s. It was in very poor condition. Refurbished it, and now makes a great conversation piece for the yard. My wife's handiwork, planting tons and tons of flowers each year. Actually, the worst part about living here in Central PA is having to put away all those pots in the winter time because I let nothing sit outside, afraid that it will crack and the freeze thaw. Future plan for our seating area up here on this concrete pad, right in the center where you see that round or that circular coffee table. I'm going to cut a hole in the concrete to build a fire pit, and we'll have chairs all around. Let's get you a little lower perspective. Great to sit on the bench and overlook the pond. By the way, those are Walmart koi and Walmart goldfish. Doing very well. I've had them almost 4 years now. These apple butter copper tins, we got these as gifts from my mother-in-law. My wife uses them very appropriately, growing coleus in them. We have There's all my friends coming to see us. They're ready for food as always. The things my wife and I like to do is add a little whimsy and humor to the yard. Right here is a smiley face growing creeping Jenny inside of a bird cage.